The tray in Alice's hands didn't tremble. That was the first rule her father had drilled into her before she was old enough to understand why. Never let them see your hands shake. She hadn't thought about that rule in 3 years. Not since she'd traded in everything he'd taught her for a white and black uniform, a tight bun, and the beautiful lie of an ordinary life. But the moment she stepped through the gilded doors of the Hyun-jae Grand Gala, silver tray balanced, eyes down, posture humble, her father's voice came roaring back. Scan the room. Count the exits. Find the light. She told herself it was just habit. Muscle memory. Nothing more. Then she saw it. Across the glittering ballroom, beyond the champagne towers and the string quartet and 500 guests who had no idea how fragile their safety actually was. A single pinprick of red light crawled slowly across the far window's curtain. Alice's breath didn't catch. Her face didn't change. But her mind went ice-cold and razor-sharp in an instant. The way it always did when her body remembered what her heart had tried so hard to forget. Laser sight. Sniper. High caliber, judging by the angle. They're positioned across the street, upper floor. Her eyes tracked the red dot with the quiet precision of someone who had grown up tracing these exact calculations on a chalkboard while other children drew stick figures. The dot drifted, settled, locked onto the back of a man in a midnight black suit sitting alone at the head table. Utterly still, utterly unbothered, as if the chaos of the room couldn't touch him. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that the jade ring on his pinky finger was a symbol feared across 6 countries. She didn't know that the single stray lock of dark hair that had fallen across his eyes meant he was already angry about something, and that his anger alone had ended careers, fortunes, and lives. All she knew was that in approximately 4 seconds, a man was going to die at a dinner table while 500 people screamed and scattered. And every ghost her father had ever chased would come flooding back into her carefully constructed ordinary life, whether she acted or not. 3 seconds. Alice set the tray down on the nearest table without a sound. 2 seconds. She crossed the ballroom in long, unhurried strides. Not running, never running, running made you a target. Weaving between guests like water finding a crack in stone. 1 second. The man in the black suit finally looked up, and for one suspended heartbeat, his eyes met hers, dark, unreadable, and dangerously calm. The eyes of a man who had never once in his life expected to be surprised. Alice's hands came up, cupped his jaw, and she kissed him. The shot shattered the window. The bullet embedded itself in the marble column directly behind where his head had been half a second ago. Champagne glasses exploded off tables. Screaming detonated through the ballroom like a second gunshot. Bodies surged toward the exits in a single terrified wave. Alice pulled back slowly. The man hadn't flinched, hadn't grabbed her, hadn't even blinked. He simply sat in his chair with the composed stillness of someone who had personally redefined the meaning of danger, and studied her face with an expression she couldn't read at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, unhurried, and colder than the marble floor. "You just saved my life." Alice straightened, smoothed her apron, reached up and tucked one small curl back into her bun. "Don't read into it," she said quietly. "I was just standing closest." The corner of his mouth didn't quite move. But something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked disturbingly like interest. "No," he said softly, tilting his head just slightly. "You weren't. You crossed 30 meters in 4 seconds without breaking your cover once." He paused, and his gaze dropped briefly precisely to her hands. "Who trained you?" Alice said nothing. In the chaos still erupting around them, not a single one of his security team had reached him yet. Not because they weren't coming. She could already see the wall of black suits converging from every direction, but because she had been faster than all of them combined. She had 3 years of ordinary life invested in never answering that question. She had 3 years of silence and white uniforms and serving trays built like a wall between herself and everything her father had made her into. And now a stranger with a jade ring and a blood-stained silk tie was looking at her like she was the most interesting problem he'd ever had the misfortune of encountering. The black sedans were already pulling up outside. She had exactly no time left to pretend she was just the maid. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The forced exit. Nobody asked her name. That was the first thing Alice noticed when the 2 men in black suits materialized out of the ballroom's screaming chaos and moved toward her with the calm, purposeful efficiency of people who had done this exact thing many times before. They didn't grab her. They didn't need to. One of them simply stepped into her path and said quietly in accented English, "Come with us," and the other appeared at her left flank before she could calculate an exit. Because yes, she was already calculating exits, cataloging distances to doors, counting bodies between herself and the nearest emergency stairwell, and the geometry simply did not work in her favor. She went. Not because she was afraid. She had trained herself out of fear the same way one trains out of a limp. Slowly, painfully, through repetition and stubbornness. She went because the man in the midnight black suit was already being escorted through a side corridor by a second security detail, and something in the rigid set of those broad shoulders told her he had already issued orders about her. The black sedan was waiting at the building's service exit, engine running, doors already open. New York City pressed in around them. The midtown noise, the streetlights, the ordinary beautiful indifference of a city that didn't care that a sniper had just tried to kill someone in a 5-star ballroom 3 floors above. And for 1/2 second, Alice considered the distance between herself and the nearest subway entrance. "I wouldn't," said a voice. She looked to her right. The man in the midnight suit was already inside the vehicle, one long arm resting along the back of the seat, watching her from the shadows of the interior with that same unreadable expression he'd worn when she pulled back from the kiss. His jade ring caught the streetlight. "I have questions," he said. It was not a request. Alice looked at the open door, looked at the street, looked at the 2 men flanking her, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. She got in the car. The door closed. The city fell silent behind tinted glass. And the man who she would only later learn was called Hyun-jae, head of the Black Dragon Syndicate, the most feared name in 7 American cities, turned to study her with the focused patience of someone who had all the time in the world and the resources to prove it. She stared straight ahead and said nothing. The car moved north through Manhattan traffic. Alice counted the turns. The gilded cage. The estate sat behind iron gates in a part of Connecticut where old money went to become invisible. It was not what she expected. She had imagined something cold, fortress-like, all concrete and surveillance. Instead, the house was breathtaking in the way that truly dangerous things often are. Elegant, immaculate, and built to make you lower your guard. They took her to a sitting room that probably cost more to furnish than her father had earned in the last decade of his life. Someone brought tea she didn't touch. Hyun-jae stood at the window with his back to her for a long moment before he turned. "You crossed the ballroom in 4 seconds, he said. "You used the ambient crowd noise to mask your footsteps. You approached from my blind left side because you'd already clocked which direction my head was turned. You kissed me instead of shouting a warning because a shout would have made me duck in the wrong direction." He paused. That is not something a catering employee learns on the job. Alice kept her hands loose in her lap, kept her face neutral. The old disciplines were coming back faster than she wanted to admit. The stillness, the controlled breathing, the way of occupying space without drawing attention to yourself even when you were the only other person in the room. "I grew up in a rough neighborhood," she said. Something moved through his eyes that might have been amusement on a different kind of man. "Your father," he said simply. The word landed like a stone in still water. Alice felt the ripple move through her chest and kept it off her face through sheer will. "I don't know what you think you know. Raymond Cole." He said the name quietly, the way you handle something old and fragile. "Operative. Retired. Deceased 18 months ago in what the official report called a gas line accident in his Washington, D.C. apartment." He tilted his head slightly. "You cleaned out his place yourself. You found nothing. You told yourself that was normal." Alice stood. "Sit down," he said. "You are not a prisoner. You are a complication I did not ask for, in a situation that will get you killed within 48 hours if you walk out that door without understanding it." She didn't sit, but she didn't move toward the door. Outside the tall windows, the ground stretched in every direction, manicured, quiet, patrolled by men she couldn't see, but could sense in the systematic way the shadows moved. She had 3 potential exit vectors, and 0 clean ones. "Tell me about the drive," Hyun-jae said. Alice went very still. She didn't know about any drive, and the look on his face told her that her not knowing was somehow the most dangerous fact in the room. The maid's disguise. She lasted 6 hours in the guest suite before she went looking for a way out. It took her 40 minutes to locate the estate staff's supply corridor, another 20 to acquire a spare uniform from the housekeeping cart, and approximately 3.5 minutes to realize, with quiet professional irritation, that the uniform was the same style she'd been wearing at the gala. The universe had a cruel sense of continuity. She moved through the estate at the measured, eyes-down pace of a domestic employee who had been there long enough to be invisible. Past the kitchen. Past the security station. Along the east corridor toward the garage wing where she had counted on arrival at least 2 vehicles whose keys would plausibly be hanging within reach. She made it as far as the garden corridor before he spoke. "You walk like a soldier, not a servant." She didn't startle. She was proud of that. Hyun-jae was standing at the far end of the corridor, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a crystal glass in one hand that he lowered slowly. He looked at her the way a chess player looks at a piece that has made an interesting and inadvisable move. "Your weight distribution," he said, straightening. "Servants shift their mass to the outside edges of their feet. Quieter on hardwood. You're centered, ready to move in any direction. It's a combat stance wearing an apron." Alice set down the tray she'd borrowed as a prop. "How many exits have you mapped?" he asked. She said nothing. "I've been counting since you arrived," he said. "The garden gate occurs to you, but you don't know about the motion sensors on the eastern wall. The garage is viable, but the vehicles are biometrically locked to my team. And the service road," he took a slow sip, "is where we would expect someone to go. So it's where we watch first." Alice looked at him steadily. "Then I'm a prisoner." "You're a woman who walked into a situation with insufficient information," he said. "Those are different things. One of them I can fix." He walked toward her, unhurried, and held out the glass. She didn't take it. "There are people," he said quietly, "who have been trying to find something your father hid for 3 years. They tried to find it through him. When that failed, they waited. And then you showed up at an event connected to Chairman Kang's financial network, wearing your father's locket around your throat, and saved the life of the one man in America who knows what that locket actually contains." Alice's hand moved involuntarily to her collarbone. The locket lay warm against her skin. She'd worn it every day since the funeral. She hadn't opened it in years. "Come back inside," Hyun-jae said. "I'll tell you what I know. You'll tell me what you remember. And we'll see if between us we can construct something that keeps you alive past the weekend." She followed him. She told herself it was tactical. The first threat. The shooting happened at 11:14 in the morning on a Tuesday, which felt almost insulting. Alice was in the estate's east courtyard, ostensibly getting air, actually running perimeter calculations for the 4th time, when she heard the sound she had grown up hearing through thin apartment walls and car windows, and the dreams she'd spent 3 years trying to stop having. Gunfire. Close. Multiple shooters. The distinctive rhythm of coordinated suppressing fire. She was moving before the second burst. She hit the interior doorway at the same time as Hyun-jae's head of security, a compact, serious man named Beck, who looked at her with brief, startled reassessment as she pressed herself flat against the wall in exactly the correct position. "Gate," he said. "3 shooters minimum," she said. 2 suppressing, 1 on the vehicle. "They're not trying to breach, they're sending a message." Beck stared at her for a half-second. Then his radio crackled and confirmed precisely what she'd said. The drive-by lasted 47 seconds. When it was over, 2 of Hyun-jae's outer gate posts were shredded, 1 sedan was totaled, and nobody on the estate was dead. But only because the attackers hadn't been trying to kill. They'd been trying to locate. "They tracked the vehicle back from the gala," Alice said, when Hyun-jae came into the security room where she was standing over the surveillance feeds with the focused calm of someone reviewing a sports replay. "But that's not what worries me." "No." She turned to look at him. "They hit the east gate. My side of the property. They weren't announcing they'd found you." She paused. "They were announcing they'd found me." The room was very quiet. Hyun-jae's jaw shifted slightly. It was the most she had seen his composure move. "Then we have less time than I thought," he said. He turned to Beck. "Full perimeter. Sweep the vehicle fleet for trackers. And get her something to wear that isn't a maid's uniform." He looked at Alice. "You're done pretending to be invisible. It's not working, and frankly it never suited you." She didn't argue. For the first time since the gala, she felt something that wasn't fear or calculation or the exhausting performance of ordinary life. She felt, against every reasonable instinct she possessed, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Shadow lessons. He started with observation. "You hesitated at the east door," he said on the second morning. 0.3 of a second. In the field, that is the difference. Alice had been aware of the hesitation. She hadn't expected him to have clocked it. She said nothing, which was increasingly becoming her primary form of conceding a point. They trained in the estate's lower level, a room that looked like a private gym and functioned as something considerably more serious. Hyun-jae moved through the space with an economy that she recognized from the very few people she'd grown up watching who truly knew what they were doing. No wasted motion. No performance. Every action executed at the minimum required force. He was teaching her. She was trying to pretend she was merely tolerating it. "Your instincts are intact," he said on the third day, circling her as she held a defensive position. "Your execution is rusty. 3 years of suppressing what you are has created hesitation where there should be reflex." "What I am," she repeated flatly. "Someone trained to protect." He stopped in front of her. Closer than was professionally necessary. "It is not something you become. It is something you either are or you are not. You are. You simply decided it was safer to pretend otherwise." "My father decided that for me," she said. It came out harder than she intended. Something shifted in Hyun-jae's expression. The nearest thing to gentleness she had seen on that face, which was disconcerting in the way that unexpected things in dangerous people always are. "He was trying to keep you out of it," he said quietly. "He kept me ignorant," she said. "That's different." Hyun-jae didn't argue that, which told her more than an argument would have. By the 4th day, the hesitation was gone. By the 5th, she was moving with something that felt like herself again, not the careful, invisible version she had constructed after the funeral, but the version that had grown up reading rooms and mapping exits, and understanding that the world was beautiful and lethal in equal measure, and you were better served by acknowledging both. On the 6th evening, they sat in the kitchen at midnight, because she hadn't been able to sleep, and he apparently didn't bother. And he poured 2 glasses of something that smelled expensive and slid one across the counter to her. She picked it up this time. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Your father helped me," he said finally. "Once. A long time ago. I owed him a debt I was never able to repay." He said nothing else. She didn't push. But when she went to bed that night, she lay awake for a long time with the locket warm in her palm, and for the first time in 18 months, she didn't only feel grief when she thought about her father. She felt something that might, cautiously, carefully, be called curiosity. The locket's secret. She was reading in the library when he found her. She'd been pulling books from the shelves mostly as a way of having something to do with her hands while she thought. A habit from childhood, when her father's apartment had been full of books that she later understood served as both library and signal cache. When you grew up in a certain world, books were never just books. Hyun-jae stood in the doorway, and his gaze went, immediately, precisely, to the locket that had slipped out from the collar of her shirt while she read. She watched him go still. Not the practiced stillness of control. The involuntary stillness of recognition. "Where did you get that?" he said. Not a question. "My father gave it to me when I turned 18, she said. "He said it belonged to my grandmother." Hyun-jae crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair, which was such an unexpected break from his default formality that she went very alert. He reached out and, with her permission given in the slight, questioning tilt of his head toward her, held the locket without touching her skin, turning it in the lamplight. His jaw tightened. "This is not jewelry," he said. "The casing is a custom alloy developed by a private intelligence firm that went dark in 2019. The engraving on the reverse side is a hexadecimal sequence. And the clasp," he turned it carefully, "has a pressure mechanism that wasn't designed to open." Alice looked at the locket in his hands. "It's a storage device," she said slowly. "It is the storage device," he said. "The one Chairman Kong has been dismantling people to find for 3 years. The one your father died protecting." The library was very quiet. Outside, the Connecticut countryside was dark and still. Somewhere on the grounds, she knew, Beck's team was on full rotation. "He hid it in plain sight," she said. "He gave it to me because no one would look for intelligence assets on a girl who was supposed to have nothing to do with any of it. And because there was no one else he trusted," Hyun-jae said very quietly. She looked at him. He was still crouched in front of her, and this close in the warm lamplight, he looked less like the immovable object she had been studying for 6 days, and more like a man carrying a weight that had been on his shoulders for a very long time. "What's on it?" she asked. "Every financial record, every communication, every operational document connecting Chairman Kang's faction to 6 government officials, 3 intelligence agencies, and enough criminal infrastructure to end his operation permanently." He paused. "Your father spent 4 years building that file." Alice took the locket back gently. "Held it. For years. The 4 years she thought he'd been pulling away from her. The 4 years she'd mistaken for distance. He was finishing something," she said. "He was finishing something for both of us," Hyun-jae said. He stood then, and his expression had closed back into its usual stone. But the stone was different now. She could see the shape of something behind it. Grief, she realized. Old and well-managed and very much present. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow I tell you the rest." Subscribe to our channel to see how this story unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The ghost of the father. He told her at dawn. They sat on the estate's second-floor terrace with coffee going cold between them and the Connecticut countryside turning from gray to gold in the early light, and Hyun-jae spoke in the unhurried, even cadence of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in his head for a long time. Raymond Cole had not been a simple operative. He had been the architect of the most significant intelligence operation against the Black Dragon Syndicate that any American agency had ever attempted. Not for the government, but as a freelance arrangement brokered between three different entities who all wanted Kong neutralized for their own reasons. And Hyun-jae had been one of those three entities. "Your father came to me 7 years ago," he said. "Not as an enemy. As a man who had spent 20 years inside a world he was trying to dismantle from the inside out. Kang's faction was metastasizing into government. Your father had children of people he cared about in positions that Kong was maneuvering to control." A pause. "He had you." Alice's hands were still around her mug. "He made a deal with you," she said. "He made a deal with the one organization positioned to do what the official bodies were too compromised to do," Hyun-jae said. "The Black Dragon was not Kang's ally. We were his competition. Your father understood that sometimes the enemy of your enemy is not your friend, but they are occasionally your instrument. And the night he died," Hyun-jae set down his coffee. "Kang's people found out about the file 3 weeks before the end. They moved on your father before he could deliver it. We were 6 minutes late." Something crossed his face that he didn't bother to suppress. 6 minutes. The morning light was full now, flooding the terrace, warm and indifferent. "He called you," Alice said. She wasn't asking. Something in the way Hyun-jae held himself told her. "He called me to tell me where the file was," Hyun-jae said. "And to ask me to find you if anything happened to him. To make sure you were safe." He met her eyes. "He described you very precisely." Alice looked away. The horizon blurred briefly, and she brought it back into focus through a discipline that was, she recognized with something like painful irony, entirely her father's. "He told me you had his eyes," Hyun-jae said quietly. "And his instincts. And that you deserved a life that had nothing to do with any of this." "He was wrong about the last part," she said. "Yes." Hyun-jae looked at her steadily. "I think perhaps he knew that too in the end. Why else would he give you the means to finish what he started?" She turned the locket over in her fingers. Her father hadn't left her out of it. He had trusted her with the most critical piece of it. He had hidden his faith in her in a piece of jewelry she had worn against her heart for 18 months without knowing. "Tell me about Chairman Kong," she said. The stone expression shifted into something sharp and resolute. "With pleasure," Hyun-jae said. The gala revisited. The invitation arrived, as Hyun-jae had arranged it to arrive, 3 days later. The Whitmore Foundation Gala. Midtown Manhattan. Black tie. 200 attendees, 7 of whom were on the operational list Hyun-jae had compiled, and one of whom was Chairman Kong himself, attending under the cover identity of a South Korean trade representative. "He'll know it's a trap," Alice said, studying the floor plan Beck had spread across the library table. "He'll suspect," Hyun-jae said, "but he won't be able to resist. The drive is the only thing standing between him and complete operational immunity. If there's a chance to recover it, he has to come." She looked up. "So we give him a chance he can't refuse." She wore midnight blue this time. Not a uniform. Not a disguise. A sleek column of silk that moved when she moved and Beck had seen to this with professional thoroughness. 3 concealed positions for equipment she sincerely hoped she wouldn't need to deploy in a room full of people she didn't intend to hit. Her hair was down for the first time since the gala. Hyun-jae looked at her when she came down the staircase and said nothing at all for a moment, which she was learning was his version of a significant statement. "The locket," he said. "I know." She touched it. The real drive was copied and secured. What she wore was bait, the casing reconstructed perfectly by Beck's technical team. It needs to be visible enough that they see it. And you need to be visible enough that they come for it. He held her gaze. "You understand what that means." "It means I'm the target." She met his eyes. "I've been the target since the gala. The difference is now I know it." Something moved in his face. She had catalogued all the small variations in his expression over the past week the way she used to catalog exits. automatically, constantly, because they were important and because she could not quite make herself stop. "Stay within 10 meters of me," he said. "I'll try," she said. "But I'm better at this than you think." "I know exactly how good you are," he said quietly. "That is why I said stay within 10 meters of me." The black sedans pulled up outside. Alice picked up her clutch and walked toward the door, and for one moment in the hallway mirror she caught her own reflection. The silk dress, the locket catching the light, the posture that did not belong to a catering employee, and thought, there you are. She had not been this person in 3 years. It turned out she had missed her. The fortress siege. Kang did not come for the locket at the gala. He came for the estate. It was elegant in a cold way. Let them feel secure in their trap. Let them return home convinced the evening had been a failure, and then hit the one place where exhaustion and relief would have lowered their guard. 32 men. 3 vehicles. Professional, coordinated, and very nearly enough. Alice was still in the dress when the alarms sounded. She had the secondary weapon from the hallway cache in her hand before the first breach team hit the east wall. The same wall she'd clocked on day 1, the one with the motion sensors Hyun-jae's man had mentioned specifically to discourage her, and she was moving down the main corridor toward the security hub when the lights went out. She didn't slow down. Darkness was not a disadvantage if you'd memorized the floor plan. "Alice." Hyun-jae's voice on the earpiece was steady and precise. "East stairwell, 2 men. Beck has the west. I need you on the 2nd floor." "Working on it," she said. What followed was 7 minutes of the most focused work she had ever done. Not violence for its own sake. She had never had the stomach for that, and her father had trained it out of her anyway. The purposeless kind, the kind that didn't protect anyone. This was purposeful. Calculated. Every action in service of the geometry of keeping people alive. She cleared the east stairwell. She cleared the 2nd floor access point. She found the man Kang had sent specifically for the locket. Moving through the guest suite where she'd spent her first night, methodically tearing it apart. And she put him on the floor with an efficiency that she recognized, with a cold jolt of emotion, as completely and entirely her father's. She found the override for the perimeter lighting in the security room and restored power to the eastern grid, cutting off the retreat vector for the vehicle team still outside. And then she walked down the main stairs into the entrance hall where Kang himself had come. Because he was that kind of man, one who needed to see the thing done himself, who couldn't trust subordinates with what he considered a personal matter. And she stood in the restored light and looked at him across the marble floor. He was older than she'd expected. Small. Impeccably dressed. He looked at her the way powerful men who have never been defeated by someone unexpected look at the unexpected thing. With an astonished offense, as if the universe had made a clerical error. "You're Raymond Cole's daughter," he said. "I am," she said. "And you had him killed." Hyun-jae came through the south door then, unhurried, adjusting his cuff. His team was behind Kang. Beck came through the east. The geometry was clean. Kang looked between them. Assessed. For one moment she saw him calculate, and then watched the calculation resolve into something bleak, because he was intelligent enough, at least, to read a room that had been deliberately set against him. "The drive won't hold up," he said. "My lawyers." "The drive is already with 3 separate federal contacts," Hyun-jae said pleasantly. "And 2 international ones. And a journalist your lawyers will find particularly difficult." He tilted his head. "Your lawyers will have an interesting few months." Kang turned to Alice. She thought about what she'd like to say. She thought about 3 years of white uniforms and tight buns, and the exhausting performance of smallness. She thought about her father's voice on her 18th birthday, pressing a locket into her palm and saying, "This belonged to your grandmother, keep it close." "My father finished what he started," she said. "I just delivered it." She stepped back and let Beck's team do the rest. The new dynasty. 3 weeks later, on an evening when the first edge of autumn had arrived in New York and the city was doing its annual brief impersonation of somewhere beautiful and bearable, Hyun-jae found her on the estate's upper terrace. She had been watching the lights of the city in the distance, the way she used to watch them from her father's apartment window when she was small, before she understood what they meant. All those lights, all those lives, all that ordinary beauty that required people like her father to protect it without ever being thanked. Hyun-jae stood beside her for a moment without speaking, which was his preferred mode of communication in moments when he was about to say something that mattered. "Kang's network is dismantling," he said. "The federal case will take 2 years. The international components are already in motion. The 6 officials are cooperating to reduce their exposure." He paused. "Your father's work held." All of it. Alice nodded. She had known this. She had followed every development with the same focused quiet she brought to everything now. Not the suppressed quiet of the woman in the white uniform, but the real kind, the kind that came from knowing who you were and being at peace with the weight of it. Beck wants to know if you're available for the Tokyo brief in November, Hyun-jae said. She looked at him. He said, and these are his exact words, that you read the East stairwell better than any of his people, and he would rather have you than argue about it. A pause. Beck does not give compliments. The fact that he generated something adjacent to one suggests he is serious. I'm not your employee, she said. No, he agreed. He turned to face her fully, and she had catalogued enough of his expressions by now to read the one he wore as something she hadn't seen on him before. Something that cost him the composure he maintained the way she used to maintain the apron and the bun. As armor, as survival, as the performance of a self that was easier than the real one. I'm not offering you employment, he said. I'm offering you a partnership. The Black Dragon's intelligence infrastructure, the contacts, the resources, the reach, and you. What your father built, properly finished. A legacy worth leaving. That's a very formal proposal, she said. I can be less formal, he said, and something moved at the corner of his mouth that she had been waiting, she realized, to see since the night in the ballroom. I'll need my own operational authority, she said. Non-negotiable. And I pick my own assignments. Within reason. My reason. He studied her. The city lights moved behind him, the whole vast ordinary beautiful machine of New York running its nightly course, indifferent and magnificent. Your reason, he agreed. Alice turned back to the view. The locket was warm at her throat. The real one, her grandmother's, her father's, hers. 3 generations of people who had looked at the world and decided, quietly and without fanfare, to stand between it and the things that wanted to break it. Tokyo in November, she said. Tokyo in November, he confirmed. She could feel him watching her with that particular quality of attention he had, the kind that saw everything and wasted nothing. Your father would have approved, he said quietly. I know, she said. And for the first time in 3 years, the thought of her father didn't only bring grief. It brought something warmer and fiercer and more enduring. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. The feeling of finally understanding the full shape of a love that had been protecting her, quietly and completely, all along. She straightened. Hyun-jae stood beside her, unhurried, certain, the jade ring catching the city light. 2 people who had inherited the weight of the world and decided, together, that they were strong enough to carry it. New York spread before them, all light and motion, an ordinary magnificent life. Alice Cole, soldier's daughter, maid's disguise, queen without a crown until now, looked out over the city her father had spent his life protecting and felt, for the first time, entirely herself. And that is where we leave Alice and Hyun-jae tonight. A woman who walked into a ballroom as a maid, and walked out as a queen. A man who spent years carrying a debt, and finally found the one person worthy of standing beside him. But don't get too comfortable, because the Black Dragon's empire doesn't rest, and neither do its enemies. The next chapter is coming, and I promise you it is going to be worth the wait. If this story moved you, gripped you, or kept you up past your bedtime, go ahead and hit that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells me you want more of this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join our family so you never miss a single chapter. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because I would hate for you to miss what's coming next. Comment below where you're watching from. Whether you're in Lagos, London, New York, Nairobi, or somewhere in between, I want to say hello to you personally. Our story is only as powerful as the people who watch it together, and I want to know how far we've traveled. Stay elegant, stay dangerous, and stay tuned, because Alice Cole's story is far from over. I'll see you in the next one.